Alright, let's talk JMACX alphas, manual adjust or electric in-cab control. We do get a lot of guys asking the difference, obviously monetary difference as well as performance. Structurally, they're virtually identical, except for on the top here, on the top of the remote resi, you've got a manual adjustment knob or an electric little stepper motor that has a little cable that goes through to little shock ECUs inside the cab. You get a little ECU that controls the front two shocks, and you get a little ECU that controls the rear two shocks, and a central program unit that your dash controller talks to. So with this little doobie, you've got, it actually reads your G sensor motion, your forward, back, your braking, accelerating, left and right lean, I suppose you could say. And we can calibrate this to increase the dampening force on each corner of the car while you're driving. So you've got a 0 to 16 preset level of adjustment there that we can actually control this knob while you're driving and change and increase and decrease the dampening force on the shocks. Once we've calibrated it, you may need to do it again if, for instance, you have a removable canopy and you just want to drive around with a tray back. Technically, you're going to be, 300 to 500 kilos less on the back, so you may as well recalibrate the rear shocks. So basically, that's how it does work. We find it particularly handy when you are touring. If you're going to pull the van off the back, you're going to be losing, up to 350 kilos off the rear ball weight. Your car is going to completely, drive completely differently when you don't have the van on. You can technically change the settings in your rear alphas while you're driving. Or another example would be if you're, say, on Moreton Island, for instance, and you want to go through some of the inland tracks, you've got a lot of undulated differences in terrain. And we find that if you're really heavy, if you've got a big, heavy, full setup canopy on the back, you really want that rear axle to articulate a little bit. You need it to move to keep the cab as still as possible. The front, we normally leave a little bit firmer actually to try and, instead of throwing the car left and right, you want it to sort of stay a little bit firmer so that it doesn't sort of resonate through to the back of the car. Everyone has a personal preference on how they like it to drive and set up, but you learn these things as you go. When you're driving these cars, you do learn the ultimate sort of setup to cater for you. Obviously, having the back being a removable canopy on this particular car, electric in-cab control is definitely the way to go. It does make it a lot easier to adjust your shocks on the fly. Pull it off, you can change it back to manual adjust mode, adjust the shocks, soften them right up, canopy goes back on, you can increase the dampening. Easy as that. Once you've done your initial calibration, it's literally just control the dial up and down. You can change and decrease the dampening force. Obviously, with manual adjustment shocks, you can still alter them to give the same amount of adjustment, but you will need to obviously get out of your car and turn those dials on the resis. On the back of the 4495s, it is a little bit tricky to get to. They are up in mounted on a cross member in here, a little bit tricky to see. It obviously does make it a little bit trickier. There they are right there to get to, especially if your underbody of the car is filthy from doing a big trip. So the electric in-cab control shocks are a sick addition to your build, in our opinion. A lot of guys don't really care. They just want a good shock that works and sort of set and forget. But most of all these adjustable shocks, they're adjustable for a reason. You to get the full benefit out of having it in there, adjust them while you can. So that's the idea of the electric versus manual adjustment shocks. Very, very cool. I'll show you that little in-cab controller again. I'll even turn it on. So here we've got our front left shock, front right, rear left and rear right. 16 being the softest setting, 0 being the hardest. So at the moment when we set up, with the canopy on the back of the car, the canopy's fairly empty, there's not much in it. We go about halfway to give the rear a little bit more control, and we'll leave the fronts at 16. Some people don't really like how rolly it is with that particular setting, so we can drop the 16, we'd go back to push our mode button, and we can cycle through the 4 presets that are already there. So we can go 16 and 16, or we can go front and rear as firm as possible, push the dial. You can actually hear the little stepper motors spinning and adjusting the dampening force in the shock when you do that. Or we can go completely soft again. 0 is still an amazing drive around town. It actually just decreases the amount the car rolls around. A little bit firmer on the bumps, but it's totally acceptable. We can go down to how we had it. I had it at PO 16. So manual mode is the mode you want it for off-roading. All right. When you're in automatic mode, the G-sensor control unit will be trying to fight with what's actually happening when you're driving around. So if you're going off-road and bouncing from left to right, your shocks are going to be constantly trying to readjust how the car's sitting. You don't really want it to do that. You want it to basically articulate and allow the travel. So off-roading, manual mode, 16 and 16. Depending on how heavy the car is, obviously. Airbag pressures come into play a little bit here as well. Like high speed on the beach, you want to be doing 60 to 80 k an hour. You got to be careful of washouts on the beach. I tend to actually click the front. I tend to increase the dampening force in the front to like around 4, and the rear around 8. So that's me driving high speed on the beach, and then I'll change it back once you get back onto the bitumen. So these are things you do learn as you go. Once you've got your little routine of what you like to do, it's pretty easy. So 16, so we've come off the beach now and we're going to go back onto the bitumen. We'll go 16, we'll go back to that one, click that, and then we're going to click that again, go back to the rear, dial the rear down to 8, click that, and we're going to push the mode button again to go back into G-sensor automatic, active control. So it's going to control the car as you're rolling around. It'll increase dampening force so if you were to do a hard right-hand turn, it's going to increase the force on the front left-hand shock and essentially decrease the force on the rear right. It's quite cool to watch. So anyway, that's my explanation on the Alpha electric in-cab control shocks. Very cool feature. Cheers, guys.